question in the back.
What happens if the robot falls and don't grab it?
The researchers cry to sleep for 3 straight days. Each Labor Day, I give a public talk updating all the cool things that have happened in humanoid robotics. Here's the talk from 2025. First off, welcome. Thank you for coming to this year in humanoid robotics. This is a packed house. Thank you for coming. Yeah, so my name is Christian Hubicki. First, I guess maybe, who am I? I am an associate professor of mechanical engineering at Florida State University in the FAMU-FSU College of Engineering. It's a joint college of engineering. And my specialty is in robotics. Okay, this is where I cut my teeth on particularly robots that walk on legs, robots that jump, including this kind of unusual robot in the lower right here was all during my PhD program and my postdoc years. And you might have noticed one of those is an ostrich, very much not a robot. Sometimes we love to study how ostriches move and other two-legged animals. Sometimes we think that we're the only bipeds in the world. We are not. Birds are, in fact, amazing bipeds that run around. We study how they move, so we make robots run better. That's what I cut my teeth on. And now I run my own laboratory with my own legged robots. This is, so basically we do the coding. We do the control algorithms to make these robots walk around. This is work done by my PhD student Tianze, as well as some of my other PhD students. And we're just basically, this robot is called Cassie. It's a little ostrich-like, and it's trying to avoid this little danger red circle, we tell it, right? Okay. And also we have a robot called Digit. You know, here's a method of it stepping over obstacles. It's all doing all of its own balancing, all of its own obstacle negotiation, using our own code. And we write papers about it like that. Okay. So that's what I do. I'm an academic, right? Which means, yes, thank you. Someone still likes us. That's good to hear. So yeah, that's sort of my bona fides. That's what I work on. Okay. But today, I'm going to be talking about humanoid robots. And frankly, a question that I get all the time, and it's a perfectly valid question, is why humanoid robots? Why have robots with legs at all? Well, because they're cool, for one. To be honest, if you ask us why is that the case, the answer is because they're cool. And I'll give you an example, because I'm sure some people like to think, yes, question.
I have a statement.
You have a statement.
If we didn't have legs, we wouldn't be able to do like almost anything. We'd need to be able to walk.
So your statement is that without legs we can almost do anything, we wouldn't be able to walk. Okay, thank you for your statement. I'll review your statement in the peer review process, okay? All right? Well, thank you. What is your name? Elena, I'm Christian. It's nice to meet you. Okay, thank you. Now, a lot of people think you can do a lot with wheels. I'll show you an example. Okay, cars. Cars get around all the time. You know, I'd rather drive to work than walk to work. You know, to each their own, I guess. And they're great when things are normal and fine and flat. But sometimes there are crazy situations that you wish you could think on your feet a little better, right? Okay, so like and one thing you can do with legs is you can change your contact points. You can step up and over things. That's what Elena is talking about here. Okay, right? That's one. So legs can be useful for these sorts of things. That's one extreme example, though. Okay. Also, in general, you know, we build our environments around us for the most part, okay? We throw stairs everywhere, okay? For some reason, well, frankly, because it's a compact way to have a structure that gets you up to the next floor. But they can be tough for wheels, which is why we have to make elevators and ramps for wheelchairs accessibility, which is how we try to adapt our environment to us sometimes. But also, where say, a building's in danger, such as a fire. Okay? And a firefighter might be wondering, is there a person still inside that building? I don't know. It's very dangerous to send in firefighters into a building. Maybe better to send a robot to run up the stairs, barge down the door, look for someone inside, right? Those are these, and also whenever we learn something about how robots walk, we also learn a lot about how people walk. This is a device called the Rewalk. It's an exoskeleton robot. It basically has a person who cannot walk strapped into it, and so they basically sort of takes them through a walking motion so they can walk again. It's sort of like, you know, Iron Man 2. I don't know, wait. It's post-Civil War where Rhodey gets injured and he needs an exosuit, right? Did I get that right? Thank you. Do I belong here now? Okay, all right. Thank you. Oh, good. Making sure I understand, right? I'm at DragonCon. So, right? But this is an active field of research. But the actual definition of why people want humanoid robots has expanded a lot in the last handful of years. It used to be almost a purely academic enterprise with a couple of companies making robots. For instance, those robots that I showed in my videos, the Cassie and the Walk-in Digit robot, I didn't build those robots. Those were built by my professor who I did my PhD with. I helped design the first version of the robot. Then he decided to go off and start a company, and I went into academia, and then he got a $200 million check from Jeff Bezos, so he's doing okay. So So I get the robots from them, right? But he's one of the few companies, it's called Agility Robotics. And he's one of the few companies for which you could build a robot. They were building robots that you could buy, right? However, these days, people are trying to push robots into different settings, okay? For instance, we've seen manufacturing robots. That's the most common robot in the world, right? Is in the manufacturing industry, right? They're welding things, they're putting doors on cars, repetitive things over and over and over again. But it's also a very well-controlled environment. There are no children running around in factories, at least there shouldn't be, right? Getting in their way, moving parts around. Very reliable. So robots are very good at that because they don't have to adapt very much. Whereas we're now trying to get autonomous vehicles, okay, where we're driving on the road and the road is a little bit more chaotic, especially around Atlanta, around a rush hour, I've noticed, right? And so it's a little crazier, so the robots have to be a bit more adaptive, so, but at least there's rules to the road. What are the rules for being outside in the woods? What are the rules? I mean, anything could be thrown at you. Some kind of animal, for all I know. I go into the woods often, as you can tell, right? Right? But the point is that all these things have increasing environmental uncertainty. And as you have more uncertainty in your environment, you often want legs to help you step over and around things. Hiking is hard when you're with wheels, as Elena would agree, right? Right, thank you. Right. So, but I will say, there is a really recent push to even put humanoids back in the factory to do things like pick up boxes, move them around. There are lots of companies pushing this direction, and I'll talk about a few of them today, okay? All right, so another question I get when I say a robot, I say, is it AI? Well, the answer is yes, but in the most disappointing way possible, okay? All right, okay, so I made this diagram because I answer this question a lot, all right? So AI is pretty much anytime you have a piece of code that makes a decision on behalf of your robot. Your thermostat, theoretically, technically, by most definitions, is AI. I'm not scared of my thermostat unless it stops working, then I'm scared of the bill that comes out, I have to fix it, right? So pretty much anything that does any kind of control code, you consider AI. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to become the Terminator, right? But there are all of these different subsets of AI. There's machine learning, okay, and deep learning, and foundation models. I'll take you through these different terms because they're showing up more and more. You'll find more and more about happening with these in the robotic space, in the humanoid space. And I'll show you, just because something is not using this fancy new deep learning you've probably heard about, doesn't mean it can't do a lot of cool stuff. Let me show you a few examples. One's very selfish, okay? This is an older video that I was actually part of. Back 10 years ago, this was our humanoid robot. This is the two-legged robot, Atreus. It doesn't have an upper body. It's driving blind over these obstacles, okay? And look, it's going to trip. You probably didn't see it. It happened really fast. But watch, I'm going to rewind it so you can see it, right? It's going to stub its toe. Look at that. Right on this edge. Kicks its leg out to the side, catches itself, and keeps going. Again, I wasn't the only one who did this. The other students in the lab contributed a ton to this. Like the guy, I shout all of them out. But the control code that did it is actually very simple in the scheme of things. In fact, this may or may not look super complicated to you, but if it does, I have a talk at 11:30 tomorrow called The Math That Makes Robots Think, where we'll go through what some of these things mean, okay? All right, so, but it's a very simple PD control loop for people who are in controls. But I'll explain what that means. It's very, very simple, okay? In fact, it's only about 800 lines of code, the whole thing top to bottom, which is almost nothing. Less than 900 lines of code to make that robot walk, okay? Theoretically, so even though it's not using machine learning or deep learning or all these things, it's pretty effective. And it's not just me. It's robots like this from Boston Dynamics. Who here has heard of Boston Dynamics? Yes, that's most people, right? Probably the most famous robotics company in the world at this point. And this is their robot Atlas, or at least is the previous version of Atlas. This was back in 2021. It's doing parkour, jumping around. Look at this. And the way it's controlled is not using fancy neural networks. Okay, it's using an approach I'll explain in a second. It's called model predictive control, but you wouldn't consider it deep learning, okay? And yet it's pretty dang agile. Look, they had 2 of them doing this. That's pretty good. By the way, that little vault with its one hand, when that came out, I happened to bump into the engineer at a conference who coded that, and I was like, by the way, who was responsible for that little hand vault with the Atlas? And he was like, me. I'm like, Really? It's like, yeah, that was my favorite part of the video because it's actually hard to do. Question.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
You're familiar with like a Roomba, one of those vacuum cleaners?
Roomba, I have a Roomba. I'm brand obligated to own a Roomba as a robotics professor. But yes.
That's an example of machine learning, right? And it gets used to its environment and maps where it crashes. And
Definition of machine learning, as I'll get to in a second, is it uses data to inform its actions, okay? And you could argue that it does, or you could argue it's using an algorithm that is not considered machine learning called simultaneous localization and mapping, or SLAM, which is the best acronym in all of robotics, by the way, which I don't think people necessarily consider machine learning, but I would not argue with you. But it certainly doesn't need to use deep learning to map the environment. But I could argue definitions all day, but that's probably one of the least interesting parts of this talk. So, but that's a great question. Thank you. This is a great question.
Right. So, now how does, I'm going to show you an example of a simpler version of the kind of controller that Atlas is using. It's called model predictive control. This is from my own laboratory. We do some drone research too. And you see this little drone dodging around this obstacle and swinging at it pretty fast, okay? How is it doing this? Well, what has some information is where the obstacle is and the direction that it's going. And then what it does, and you can see a overhead view of it being run in a different situation. You see this blue robot in the middle here. It's going to go here. Its job is to dodge around this red robot that's chasing it down with a very simple chase law, okay? And what it's doing is it has an internal understanding of how it moves and where it wants to go. It's called model prediction. So it has an understanding of itself called a model and wants to make a prediction as to where it's going to go. And it's constantly updating its prediction based upon where it's being chased to. Very, very simple version of what Atlas is doing using model predictive control. No neural networks required to do that, okay?
So I just want to show you that there's a lot of really great controllers that don't involve deep learning and neural networks. This is MIT Humanoid using another model predictive control approach. They do a really fancy one called nonlinear model predictive control. Blah, 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 very cool. Check out their work, all right? But probably most fun, even though it's not a humanoid, anyone watch America's Got Talent this season? They had robots. They had a robot dance. These are Boston Dynamics' spot quadrupeds, okay? And this was so cool to me. I found it so relatable. One, I've always wanted to make robots dance, as they do here, okay? And they start. I think they're singing Freddie Mercury, whatever that song is. Yeah. So you can see, and they walk around in formation. And I think my favorite part that is most relatable, if you give this a second here, one of the robots. Oh, there you go. Look at that. Happens all the time. No shade on Boston Dynamics. But they're like, it died. It's died. The judges are like, it's dead. It's dead. It's fine. So it happens. Things go wrong in robotics. But it's also not using things like neural networks for the control, as far as everything we know. Okay? So with that said, let's talk about some of these fancier, newer techniques that are really powerful. Machine learning, all it means is it takes in data from its environment. You're able to give it data, and it comes up with a better understanding of of the data from learning. Okay? Who here has used Microsoft Excel in their lives? Okay. Does anyone enjoy that process? Some of you. Okay. Maybe some of you. Anyone made a trend line in Excel? You've done a bunch of data. You trend line. Okay. You're so excited. Tell me what a trend line is.
That's when you try to find a line that best fits your data.
Yeah.
I'm doing this because it does this every time I get another trend line.
So it does line. You're finding a line that best fits your data? Congratulations, you did machine learning, my friend.
Yay!
Yay! That's machine. That in the simplest form, that's machine learning. Okay. But the way you define your model is the line. Anyone take algebra or geometry? Anyone remember y equals mx plus b? You define a line by that m, which is the slope, and the b is the intercept. That's two parameters that you can define your line with. With a neural network, when it gets really, really complicated, all of a sudden you're dealing with tens of thousands or maybe millions of those parameters. That's the key difference here, okay? So now let's talk a little about deep learning here. So basically it's machine learning on steroids. And what really kicked this off in the bipedal world was work with, this is not my work, they just happen to use the same robot that I use, okay? At Oregon State University, the laboratory, they came up with a way to use deep learning to make this robot go downstairs blind, okay? It can't see. They're just telling it go forward, and the robot is going down the stairs. That would give me a heart attack if I tried to do that with my robot. Granted, they're holding a little post over its head in case it falls, so they don't destroy their research, right? But it's incredible what they're able to do. And I actually got an email from a colleague when this video came out, and it basically said, "Holy crap." Holy crap is what they said. Yes, question?
How heavy is that robot?
That robot's 70 pounds. Yeah, the robots these days are a lot lighter than you would expect. Mostly, it's a way of draining the battery less quickly. Okay, it's mostly made out of aluminum and carbon fiber. Okay, is typically the materials. Yes, question, Elena.
If they accidentally like raise the pole too high, they could break the robot because the robot is supposed to be on the stairs. So what would happen if that did happen?
You asked a very good question. The question was, what happens if they lift up the robot too high? I'll show you a video of what happens in a little bit. Can you wait a little bit? It's a couple slides down the way. More than a few. But all right, but it's there, okay? It's a super good question. Applause for that question. Yeah. Question in the back.
What happens if the robot falls and don't grab it?
The researchers cry to sleep for 3 straight days. I'll show you another way that people respond to their robot crashing and burning. Okay, there's a few of these examples.
They
Okay.
could build a new one.
Yeah, you can always build a new one. That is
But
true.
That doesn't mean that it won't happen again.
Oh, you'll make a great roboticist someday, if not already. All right. So, but this is an incredible advance, and it used deep learning, particularly something called deep reinforcement learning. The idea is that people figured out that you can run pretty accurate computer simulations of the robot inside the computer and try out different what we call policies. That's the controller. That's the thing doing the motor thinking of what to do when. Okay, and so and it turns out that your graphics card, who here has a graphics card in their computer? The answer is yes, okay. They're actually, turns out they're better than just for playing insert game here. What, Elena, do you play games? What games do you play? A lot, okay. That's my favorite game, Elena, thank you. So you can play a lot of games on your graphics card, but you can also run a lot of computer simulations on your graphics card, all at the same time, it turns out. So people run hundreds or thousands of different versions of the robot trying different things, and what they'll do is they'll use it to train what they call a neural network, okay? Yes, question?
In that game that was in the last slide, the robots were like all walking around in the simulation. Do they usually visualize the simulation, or is it just like they get the feedback data from it?
The question is, do people typically visualize the simulation? Only sort of to show off, right? You often don't watch the simulation, and you just kind of let it churn. The thing that you will see is a little plot that's basically, does it get better or worse over time? And that's called the reward. Okay, it's reinforcement learning. Like I would treat my dog with a reward. I reinforce it well with a treat. If it walks well, you give it a treat. And that treat is defined by a mathematical function that people got really good at defining called a reward function. So we'll just watch that. My student will text me at night. It's like, I ran the training algorithm, and it'll show me the plot, and it would like tank and not get it. It's like, okay, I have to try that again. So we typically won't watch that. We'll just render it afterwards to show how cool it is. That was a long question, the answer to your question, but thank you. All right, so that's that's deep learning, okay? And basically what makes it deep, as I was going to explain here, okay, is this thing called a neural network, okay? And it sounds super fancy for those of you who haven't seen one, but honestly, the math inside of that, who here has a scientific calculator or has used one in their lives, okay? You see like the things that say like tan and sin and cos and things and tan H. Those little tan H's, the world runs on tan H's now. So it's basically each one of these things, it can be a number of things, but often it's a little tan H, okay? All right. And so what we figured out in the last, frankly, 15 years is just like you ran a trend line in Excel and it gave you the line that fit the data. It's much harder on a neural network to find the M and the B, those parameters that fit a good controller for your robot. Until about 10, 15 years ago where people figured out how to do that using graphics cards, okay? Look up something called AlexNet if you're curious, and people have found ways to apply it. This particular method is called PPO, or Proximal Policy Optimization, for another time, okay? All right, now we get to something called foundation models. Who here has heard of a foundation model? Anyone? Some of you, and that's totally reasonable. Who here has heard of ChatGPT? Yes. ChatGPT is what's called a foundation model. Who here has heard of like these text prompts to image things? You know, you make deep fake images or whatever using that. That uses a method called stable diffusion. It's another form of foundation models. And basically this is a sort of a buzz term that once these things started coming out, academics said, let's just not call them different things. Like for instance, ChatGPT, people will call it an LLM or a large language model. Turns out you can use these things for all kinds of applications, including robot control, all right? So I'll show you some things, and that's what's gotten really hot in the last year, is using things that are like ChatGPT and like image generation to do robot control, okay? So here's an example what something came out, and by the way, the pace is dizzying about all the robot news that's come out in the past year. Early this March, NVIDIA, who here has heard of NVIDIA? Okay, yes, they're a graphics card company. They make gaming cards. I remember I went and found a commercial from them in like 2005, basically promoting how they could play Halo really well on their graphics card. Now they've learned, basically they're really good at training AI models and machine learning models. And so right now they're worth $4 trillion. They're the most valuable company in the world because of the current AI bubble. And so in case people are curious, when people say AI these days, colloquially, they mean foundation model, okay? That's so if people are like, oh, I think that's an AI video, foundation model. It's like, oh, I used AI to generate the solution to this, you know, this homework problem, which you should not do, okay? That's the foundation model, okay? All right, but people at NVIDIA and also the Isaac Corporation basically work together to try to do something similar with robots, where you could prompt a robot to say something like, pick up the wheel, and it will pick up the wheel, and all the things it has to do in between. And that uses foundation models. And they're not one, you can download this foundation model. And what this requires is a couple of things. It requires people doing a bunch of demonstrations. You can see a couple of times there are people in this video, and they are controlling the robot by hand. It's called teleoperation, and giving examples, okay, of how to do a bunch of different tasks. And then this foundation model will take all those examples, sort of stitch them together along with some other information, in order to come up with this piece of code, which takes in, like here we go. It says pick up the industrial object and place it in the bin, okay? And then it'll take the command, it uses image data and tries to pick things up. This is the new hotness in robotics. And just as a little bit of a spoiler, it's amazing the things that they can get a robot to do with this method. However, it is unclear how reliably it can do it. Okay, you'll find really awesome YouTube videos like this one of people showing the times it worked. But far fewer are the organizations who will go through and say, okay, how many times out of 100 does it actually work, right? You know, I'm not great in the kitchen, but if you ask me to put away the dishes, I bet I could do it almost every time correctly, right? So, but if we want our robots to actually do stuff for us, okay, either in our homes or in factories or wherever, you don't want them to be more hassle than they're worth. And that's where the danger currently lies with the applicability of robotics as to whether or not they're actually good at what we think they're good at, okay? All right, and there are also other companies, plenty of other organizations who are trying to take this approach of using quote unquote foundation models. All right, and so this is a company called Skilled AI, and their whole thing is they want to make a big foundation model, like almost like a ChatGPT, that doesn't control just one kind of robot, but every kind of robot. All right, and this is where we start to use phrases like end to end. All right, so similarly, here's Boston Dynamics. They made a new version of Atlas. Look at this, pretty cool. This came out earlier last year. Okay, yeah. Just like a person, right? Just like me, it's as limber as I am, right? Walking around. This is the newer version of their Atlas robot that was doing parkour before, okay? And so they unveiled this robot, okay? And they started using things like deep learning to make it walk more naturally, okay? So, it's walking more naturally. They get to run, which is actually a very natural run. They're doing that same approach where you use lots of computer simulations and you try to get it better and better and better, and it's crawling. This is actually very hard to do. Anytime you have the robot touching and then not touching things over and over and over again, that's actually very hard in robotics. Yes, question, yes.
How do you get like the knees to bend for the robot? How do you design it to be able to have joints?
So this is a good question. So this is something for everything, for every video here. For the vast majority of them, except ones that will be super clear, every joint on the robot bends because it has a motor there, electrical motor. It's using electrical motors, and it's being commanded to go to a certain angle, okay? If you want to know how to do that, come tomorrow at 11:30 a.m., all right? All right. So you can see, but it does all kinds of, did you see the cartwheel? Did I miss the cartwheel? Yep. Okay, good. Cartwheel. Amazing, right? So they went from using what were more model-based controls, these model predictive control techniques I showed you before with a little path planning happening, to something like deep reinforcement learning. This happened earlier this year. And now they're using more foundation models work, right? Model work, where they're trying to train every aspect of how this robot is controlled using a neural network. We call that end-to-end, that every component of the control is in fact controlled by a neural network, right? Okay, yeah. This is a staple of robotics where you mess with the robot somehow, okay? Look at that. So, but this is very impressive. So what they did is they teamed up with Toyota Research Institute, which is actually an organization I have some ties to. They funded some of my work for a number of years. And they are doing, the people doing the foundation model side is Toyota Research Institute. And they work together with Boston Dynamics. They're now a team, okay, to try to get humanoids to do more, okay? So yeah, so like a lot of people are using these foundation model approaches, right? And this will crop up here and there, these different terms. I just wanted to give you an introduction and some cool things that have been happening, all right? Okay? Oh, here you go. Here's the skilled AI, end-to-end locomotion. Here's that phrase end-to-end again, all right? And here you have the robot. You know, it has vision. It actually can see in front of it, unlike when our Atreus robot was walking blind. It can see in front of it, and it's navigating pretty well. Not bad, right? Not bad. So here's some other news this year, okay, that I thought was really cool. So, Elena, is that your name? Did I get that right? Thank you. Right. Elena asked how these different joints are being moved. They're with electric motors, like a much smaller version of what would be an electric car, or the thing that's making your dishwasher whir around, or your blender, right? Just a more fancy version of those. But, you know, they have their advantages and disadvantages. I mean, we're not driven by electrical actuators. We're driven by muscles and tendons, or what we call the muscle tendon unit, right? And the idea of having a robotic muscle is not new. There's something called the McKibben actuator, which is kind of an interesting experimental device. But in the last handful of years, a new startup came to be, and they're using a particular kind of fluid-based actuator. And they're really going gangbusters with it. Let me show you what it looks like here. Look at this. Called Clone Robotics. It's a startup based out of Poland, right? It's an entire upper body of a robot, and they're actuating all these little muscles and tendons inside of it. It's really cool. I think one thing it's hard to appreciate is it's louder than I think that you would understand, because there's lots of little valves opening up and closing, back and forth and such, right? Okay, it does. Yeah. Who thinks that's a little creepy? Okay, all right. Okay. I'm just curious. I'm a little immune to it, to be frank. It takes a lot to creep me out with robotics, right? And I said, well, that's cool. Call me when there's legs. That's when I care. And then they did this. Okay. So, all right. Yeah. This whole thing. So now this is switching around. You know, it's not doing locomotion control. It's not putting one foot in front of the other per se and walking around. But like this came out this year. I'm like, this is amazing. This is amazing. Part of me would love to be on the team trying to get to make that walk, but like these actuators are strong. It's unclear how practical they'll be. But one thing that's really neat about a softer robot that's made out of muscles and tendons is that it's actually safer, generally speaking. When we talk about the dangers of robotics, like in practicality in my world, it's will the robot fall on you by mistake and hurt you? Right? Or you bump into it and there's a sharp edge on it and you cut yourself, right? But if your robot is really soft and kind of like, if you bump into me, as hard and strong as my muscles are, you probably won't get hurt too much, right? So anyway, so there are lots of advantages to having musculoskeletal work. And I'm curious to see how they get to walking. That's going to be a real tough challenge for them. But I want to highlight that there are other approaches to humanoid robotics out there than just electric motors, okay? And just the sheer number, though, of different robotics companies that are popping up making humanoids is just dizzying, okay? One of which is Tesla. Who's heard of a Tesla? right? Okay, Tesla, yes, very. So Tesla has unveiled in 2022. They had the Tesla Optimus robot. Kind of, I'll show you. But then in October of last year, 2 years later, they've iterated on this robot. It's coming a lot better. Okay, and they had this event called We Robot, where they, in the middle of this big tech demo, they marched out 20 different humanoid robots. That's a lot of robots. You don't see that many of these robots all in one place, okay? They're walking around. And you also notice they're walking a little slow. They're actually using an approach that's a lot more, it's probably not using a neural network approach to walking. It's actually what we call, using something we call zero moment point walking. Fancy term, but what it means is that it's walking in a way where the center of its body, it's over its feet almost all the time. When your center of mass is over your feet, you're not falling. Right? You're like a stable table, right? Then it puts a foot down, you transfer your weight to the other foot, you continue. That's why it's walking like this a little bit. It's very safe, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I just want to point out that that's probably how it's walking. So that's cool. They got the robots to walk. Good. Not easy to do. Number one. Number two, they had the robots dancing. Okay. All right. I guess that's dancing. Yeah. I think it's so, yeah, just dancing around. It's like, okay, that's cool. But another trick to note when you're looking at humanoid robots, if it's dancing, if it's just keeping its feet in place and doing this stuff, that stuff's pretty easy to do in the scheme of things for robotics, okay? We use something called inverse kinematics, and that basically tells us if we want to make this motion, how do we get to that place? If you want to learn more about inverse kinematics, come tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. You know, look at me plugging away. And I was like, okay, that's nice, a nice demo. Where things get tricky with dancing is if you're taking steps and doing kick routines and stuff. That's where it gets really tricky with robotics. So stay tuned for later. Okay, but then at the end, they had robots being bartenders, walking around at the event, and waving and interacting with the crowd. And a lot of people very impressed, understandably, but I think a lot of robotics people, myself included, were like, that ain't right. Something about that. What's going on here? Well, there's actually literally a man behind the curtain. Okay? All right? Look, it's used, so I don't know if he's literally behind where he is, but it's what we call teleoperation, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. This is like when that one guy was trying to command the robot with his hands how to move the robot. That's called teleoperation, right? So this basically somewhere nearby, there's a guy guy or gal in a motion capture suit and a VR headset that is moving around, the robot's following its motions. Technically, that's a tricky thing to do, but I think if you watch that, you might think, oh, wow, the robot's smart enough to do bartending, but it's not, okay? So, yes, question?
Is it possible to actually have the robot be smart enough to do that?
People are working on that. That's what all that stable diffusion foundation model stuff is. That's what people are trying to do. And that's what's sort of being implied here, but that it wasn't what it is, okay? So one thing you gotta be pretty clear about when you see a cool demonstration, ask yourself, is that the robot doing it autonomously or isn't it? And nowadays in videos, people will mark in the corner autonomous to make it clear that that's the case or not, okay? Similar thing at the Tesla Cafe, Tesla Diner, I'm sorry, okay? You had a Tesla Optimus at the Tesla Diner, okay? And filling popcorn, that's cute. That's a cute thing. Just understand that there's a person puppeteering the robot, okay? Just to understand that. And there's good, yes, question, sir.
Is there much copying between studios of work?
Is there much copying between companies of work? I can't say for certain, but the answer is yes, okay? There's a lot of people converging on the same solution, and you'll see shockingly similar approaches show up in different parts of the world, even. Okay, so once you see one group doing a thing now, like literally, that Boston Dynamics robot, that robot standing up in that weird way where it puts feet over its head. Literally, less than a week later, a Chinese company called Booster Robotics had a tiny version of that robot, did the exact same thing to show that they could, right? Like to show that they could do that. But it's cross-pollination all over the board. So yeah, and people are not in their silos. And I don't think there's anything one of these companies that's doing that is like miles ahead of any other of these companies in terms of approaches. Okay. So, but speaking of one of these companies, one that is actually doing really well, it's getting a lot of attention, it's called Unitree Robotics. Has anyone heard of Unitree Robotics? A couple people. Oh, wow. They're going to be pretty famous, I think, soon, because they're really fast and good at pumping out robots. So one thing that they put out was back in August 2023 was the Unitree H1. Okay, people love kicking the robots, by the way. I wasn't immune to it. I did it in grad school. I recovered. Okay, but it's just a safe way to like impart what we call an impulse to the robot, to shove it a little bit. He looks a little aggressive with it though. But the thing that was really cool about this robot, we've seen humanoids take kicks before. Atlas could take kicks and punches. Well, not punches. That hurts us, not the robot, when he punched the robot. But the thing that was really a big game changer is that, like, back when I was a grad student, if I wanted to buy a humanoid robot from one of the only companies that made one, it probably cost me $500,000 to $1 million if I wanted to get one. The only people that could afford that are giant research groups. Okay, and when I bought a robot for my laboratory in order to show off my algorithms, it cost a couple $100,000, right? This one was now $90,000, much cheaper. This is now inexpensive enough that a lot more laboratories can just buy one to use. That was normally a big barrier for entry. Okay. All right, and here's an example at Stanford University, this Chelsea Finn's group, they use the robot to do what they call motion targeting, this approach called Human Plus. They want to show that it could autonomously put a shoe on, stand up, walk around. They've done a lot more, but that's the Unitree H1 robot. They bought one. They can do research with it. It's so much faster when you have your own robot to work with. Okay, and it eventually ties its shoes. There we go. Not bad. That's pretty good. Stand up, you do it. There you go. And walks in the shoes. Pretty good. That's not the most beautiful thing, but that's impressive. That's impressive, right? And it's using cameras and stuff to do that. It's not being told where the shoes are. It can see it, right? Really impressive stuff. And they can do that because they can afford a robot, all right? Okay? But then came out, a year later, actually happened in 2024 when the robot came out. This is a video from 2025. Look at this. This is the Unitree G1. It's a bit shorter. It's about yay tall off the ground, okay? But it's really agile. Look at this. They're using deep reinforcement learning for that, by the way, in case you're curious what they're doing. When I talked about cool dances where you change whether or not your foot hits the ground or not, that's it. That's awesome, okay? But even more importantly, $16,000. Right? Okay. Wow, indeed. So now labs all over the place. I can't buy one. I don't have that much on me. But my lab could buy one, right? And so we're considering it, that's right. So much, much cheaper. So as a result, you're seeing them everywhere. Here's a Pride robot. Hobbyists are buying these. Just having them in the street in addition to doing research, right? Okay, so if you see robots running around right now in the wild, it's probably Unitree G1 because it costs about $16,000. Now, if you want to do research with it, you'll have to buy in a development version that you'll be able to code yourself. That's going to cost you extra. And one of the things we'll always ask when we go to trade shows about robotics, they'll show off this robot that you can buy, and we'll ask, do we have torque level access? And what that means is, do we get to say how much torque each joint actually gets to apply? And that's clearly, with some people were able to get joint level access to this, including this guy, okay? That's the robot in the corner right here. These robots are everywhere, so you can see where they screw up. Watch this robot here, okay? Should. All right? So you're going to see lots more robot mistakes happening in the wild here, because these things are cheap enough, you see them everywhere, okay? And this guy commented, people are like, what happened? Was the robot trying to escape? And Elena, you know what happened?
What?
Well, you'll see in a second, because the guy on Twitter.
Did he get kicked?
He did not get kicked, don't worry. He's fine, only his ego is bruised, okay? He said, please make this go viral so I can pay for repairs, is what he said. So he put out this video himself to go viral so he can pay for repairs for it. Well, what happened to it? Well, remember when you asked for the robot, what happens was it gets lifted off the ground by a rope? That's what happened. For technical reasons, we ran a full body policy while the feet weren't touching the ground, meaning it was lifted up by that rope, right? You turned it on, it didn't know what to do, so it started kicking and flailing around. So if you see a robot freaking out, there are multiple of these robots doing this exact same thing, and people are like, there are literal news articles saying, robot comes alive, it's trying to escape. And it's like, no, it's just all those simulations you saw in the computer that were being run where they're all walking around, None of those scenarios where it was dangling in the air. None of them. And you had a question before. I apologize. I missed your question.
I was just wondering if the simulations that y'all train the robots on, is that the same type of simulations that like CGI artists use to try to develop realistic walking around and stuff for CGI and animation?
So it's a good question. The question is, are the simulations that roboticists use similar to what graphics people use for movies? They are similar, but they are specialized to different things. It's very, in animation, it's got to kind of look right. So you can tweak things that are hard to compute accurately. You can just kind of fudge a little bit. A big one is contact. By that I mean like legs hitting the ground. Impact and contact, that's one of the most painful things to simulate. It slows down your computer a lot. But in robotics, it's everything. You know, how you hit the ground changes so much about about how your robot behaves. So like so when people figured out a good software package that does it well, such as Mujoko is one that's very popular that people use, we flock to it in robotics. Is there a question over there? Someone have? No, I'm just going crazy. Okay, all right. So this person, I ran the policy when the feet were on the ground. Don't do that, is what he said. Don't do that, right? So these robots are everywhere now. But I will say, now there's the Unitree R1. Okay, this came out a month ago. Okay, all right. About the same size. Maybe it's skosh tinier than the Unitree G1. Okay, all right. And look at all the cool things. There's all these. They use deep reinforcement learning for that. So they're running all those simulations, right? Okay, very cool, right? Best part here? $5,900. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They're getting cheaper. Now, how they're doing that, I can speculate, but I don't think they're turning a profit. I think someone's funding them and is willing to burn some cash in order to give this company a good reputation. But that's cheap. That's cheap. You know, for a robot, right? So that's one of the things that's happening in humanoid robotics, is that the costs are going down, 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 right? So expect to see more of the R1s. And here's another company I should point out. There are so many, so I didn't bother pointing out all of them. Literally, there are probably 100 of these companies now. And the Engine AI does a really good job with their walking gait. Like they more walk sort of a heel to toe type fashion. I actually think this is one of the cooler robotic walking gaits that it comes up with. It's a very interesting job. I don't know what they're going to sell it for. I felt it was somewhere in the, don't quote me, somewhere in the 20-ish K range, $20,000 range. But it's really one of the ones I wanted to highlight as being really just dynamic and interesting. So, moving on to more humanoid events. Okay, who here heard of the World Humanoid Robotics Games? Somebody? Yeah, a couple of you? Happened just a few weeks ago. Okay, all right. Turns out it's like, how did I miss this? How did I miss this event? Like it just crept up on me. Turns out it was announced when I was, let's just say, out of the country and out of contact. Okay, so but one thing that's really awesome about it is that all these things that I would do as like a grad student, like with our robots, walking over obstacles, are now like events at a real competition. It's really neat. You'll notice, hey, which robot is that? Anyone know? The Unitree G1 right there. Okay, so, and it's fun because like I remember back when I was a wee baby grad student 10 years ago, we were doing these things just in the laboratory, right? It was just, we had a robot, it would be blindly walking over these obstacles, and we'd see, hey, could we get it to not fall down? And it was really cool to see this, like something like this as a real event. And that's really neat, okay? And in addition to that, like they had other events such as the 400-meter dash, okay? Yeah, and it's actually, it's pretty good. See, the things that Unitree's, this is a Unitree H1 that's running around here on the track. You'll notice there are people running alongside of it with a little game controller. See if you can actually see it. Who's back there? There he is. He's the game controller. There. See it? See it? He's steering it. He's trying to keep up with the robot. It's pretty fast. I'm not sure if it's quite a world record for a humanoid, but it's probably close, if not actually, right? Okay. Unitree Robotics is really good at making fast-running robots. Their deep reinforcement learning approaches are really good. The robots are really lightweight. Okay. All right. But they didn't always work, a lot of these robots. I'll show just a couple of examples. These are more the booster robotics variety. They just kind of, there were a lot of news articles about robots falling down. Anytime there's a robotics event that's live, the next day there's going to be news articles about the robots falling down. Yeah, it's a rule. Okay. There was robot soccer. Okay. All right. So this whole event really felt like it was put together. Yeah, it was put together pretty quickly, so things kept happening, right? And this is the one that made the most news here. We got this robot here, ready, and boom! Oh, got him. Okay, yes. Not sure how we could see it. Robot kept going. I'll point out the robot kept going. That's pretty impressive. I will give them their deep reinforcement learning policy is very, very good. Yeah. So, before we worry about the apocalypse, okay? Again, there's some dude here with a stick who is probably a little bit embarrassed, or he hates that guy. One of the two. One of the two, right? And this is actually a thing. It's actually a very common thing. One of the more ways that when you're steering a robot, like the way, in case you're curious how it's actually being controlled, imagine a like PlayStation or Xbox controller and any first-person shooter. Left stick, forward, backward, left, right, strafe. A right stick, change orientation. That's how you drive these things. And you have a couple of stick buttons for different controllers. Yes?
What I also noticed, the reason why it hit her is because they were swapping the controllers with each other.
Oh, they were swapping. Oh, I didn't see that. They were doing a... Oh, I never caught that. Oh, they weren't paying attention. No distracted driving. No distracted driving, right? Human error. Yes, question.
Is there a reason that they have to steer it instead of it just being able to stay within 2 lanes?
Yeah, it's because it's easier. It's easier, right? It's great. So, theoretically, you can make something like that Skilled AI had a version. They have vision incorporated into it. But Unitree is really good at these control level policies. Okay, and so in fact, what are the things that Unitree's robots are really good at? They're really good at rough terrain. They're really good at running fast with a controller. And earlier this year, let's see if I have this, they can do kick fighting. Okay, kind of. All right, look at this. So you got this, kicking this, right? And boom, boom, boom. So basically, it's using a very similar type of controller policy, except it's saying stay up while also throwing a punch. Well, this is one of the cooler parts here. Look at this. Gets back up again, right? So this came out a couple of months ago. So when this came out, the World Humanoid Robot Game said, you know what we're adding? A robot boxing event, okay? So it's a robot boxing event. What a coincidence that they added this for this company. So all these are Unitree G1s, all punching around. Look at this, okay? But again, they are being piloted by a person in the back. I'll show you right here. There you go. There's the two operators. They're basically playing Rock'em Sock'em Robots. They're driving it around. They hit a button for punch, hit a button for kick. I don't know exactly the configuration. I didn't check their button layouts. But that's what they're doing, right? All right. So you have a bunch of robots. You see they all get chairs too. How nice, right? This is one of the cooler things that happened in the event. Watch it. So it falls over. Okay. Well, this one got knocked over. I think this is the one. I think the way it gets pushed back in slow motion. Watch this. Falls down. Boom, get back up, right? I wish they played the whole clip there. Well, here we go. Look at that. That's impressive, right? That's really good stuff, right? Yeah, question.
Okay, so I live in LA,
yes.
And in LA there's all these little delivery robots that are driving around. And
yes, the kids call them clankers, I believe.
Yes. They're weird, but everyone was under the impression, I almost feel like they marketed them in such a way where they're they're driving themselves, they're autonomous, and then it comes out that they're actually just being controlled. Mm-hmm. So are there a lot of, I imagine there's a lot of discussions happening around the ethics of the marketing of what's autonomous and what's not?
This is a great question. I'm sighing just because I relate to it. Okay, this is great. So let me fast forward to the end of the talk. That might be the next slide. Let's talk about that. Let's get to the end here. Let's see if we can get. I just want to show quick. There's robot ping pong. We're running out of time. So I was robot ping pong that came out yesterday. This is my job now. It's just finding robot videos and putting them in slides. And there's robot boxing matches in San Francisco. That's actually probably one of the markets right now. Humanoids are not, so let me get to exactly the point I want to get to, which is a response to your question. What's your name? Jolie. Jolie? Jolie. All right, so where's this all going? Okay, where's this all going? What are the questions we need to ask ourselves? And one is extremely relevant to your question, Jolie, which is, how are these things being advertised, and what is the actual reality? And right now, Silicon Valley is involved, and there is an impetus when you are a company to show off your best stuff, the best versions of what it can do, and market it, right? This was what came up with the whole Tesla event. People felt a little deceived because it was sort of implied that these robots were autonomous when they were being puppeteered. For any of these driving robots, it makes total sense that there are humans behind the scenes overseeing them. But you got to be honest about that, right? Because that's, one, it's a good safety feature, but if you're trying to invest in this company, is that going to scale up to a larger area? If you have to hire many, many people who are robot overseers, is that going to be a functioning part of the business model? I don't know. I'm not a business guy. That's why I went to academia. Okay. So, but that is a genuine thing in robotics we have to be increasingly cognizant of, because it's really easy to make a robot look awesome in a YouTube video, or to show a few examples, even in a small city area, of your robot working really well. We now have Waymos here in Atlanta. We notice those driving around? Yeah, I don't know much about the internals of Waymo, and I won't pretend to know, but one thing we do know is that a lot of the time they have human drivers back at base who are overseeing the car. And frankly, I'm grateful for that, right? But other companies have gotten burned by by coming out how often the humans are driving the car. I believe Cruise, it was a big news story that 2% of the time it was the humans were taking over the vehicle. That's a lot. That's not going to scale up to the United States or whatever country you're in, right? So that is a major thing. So here's the hierarchy. This is Dr. Hubicki's hierarchy of what we need in robotics. Okay, one, we need them to be able to do the task we want them to do, and right now, there are examples of robots doing all kinds of things autonomously, right? Is it reliable? How do you know, right? The company hopefully will give you numbers, but a lot of the time they don't have them. The Toyota Research Institute actually does a lot of research into their models to see how reliable they are. They put out, Russ Tedrake just put out a giant study really looking at and publishing what the effect of all these different controllers were, and it was like, there was some percentage of times it would work and other times it wouldn't, right? So how reliable is it? And how would you know if it's reliable? You can't tell from a YouTube video. You can't, right? You can a live demo is better than a YouTube video, okay? Because then you can't cut around that with video editing, right? But you don't know if that was the good time it worked. Odds are you're pretty confident if you did a live demo. Live extended demos are better. Agility Robotics will do live extended demos. They will go take their robots to like a trade show and run their robots for hours at a time doing their task, right? And even then they'll still fall down sometimes. It happens, right? But that reliability bridge is going to be so important for actually adopting these robots, all right? So keep in mind for that. And I guess we'll just open this up for questions now. I think you all started. So thank you all very much for your time. Yeah. Let's see. Start in the back over there.
Yeah, how often or many have you seen sentient AI in any of the robots?
How often have I seen sentient AI in any of the robots? The short and quick answer is just zero. I mean, nothing that I could in any meaningful way call sentient or like self-aware. I mean, it's doing, look, you can get into an argument about these things, but really like once you have your eye on how it's doing these things, it's like, it makes sense. Like, oh, the sensor is reading this, and therefore it's doing this. It can get really complicated in the middle, but I wouldn't call it sentience. Let's see, over there. Yes?
What's the state of the art right now with simulating hands?
State of the art, we can simulate hands pretty well. There are people who do deep reinforcement learning on what we call dexterous manipulation. One thing is to take a cube and manipulate it in your hand and things like that. There's a group at University of California, San Diego who's really good at that. And I think that people are really focusing on, this is the adage I'll give you. It's amazing what we can get robots to do. It's unclear how reliable we can get them to do it. And so we can do a lot, there are some groups doing a lot of great stuff with dexterous hands. So, all right, and see you, sir.
So you mentioned the models and stuff that you guys run, in the NVIDIA's cards, you guys are very good at running those models.
Yes.
Is it still hard to get the processing power to run enough models to get the data you want?
We're always fighting the limitations of our hardware.
So do they ever do anything like crowdsourcing, so just steady at home folding where they have stuff people using their cards to do things.
So So the question is, have people done like a SETI at home distributed computing kind of deal? I actually am not familiar with people doing that. Well, it makes sense. What people typically do is they farm it out to their own clusters at their own universities. They have their own internal resources or get access to other institutions. So that way it's all in one thing. But I think that the tricky part is sort of the throughput, because like it's not like you run. There's enough. It's not fully parallel. There's enough times where you have to check back in together that that would probably make it a little bit more challenging. You're talking like SETI at home, you'll have people like taking a whole bunch of data, like a giant batch, and then ship off when they're all done. Parse it up, right? The back and forth here for this is much higher. So that's probably would make that less viable. I never thought of it though, honestly. Yeah, question there.
Question is, I'm confused where the money goes. Like,
Yeah.
okay, these companies, a lot of robot companies making these humanoid robots,
Yeah.
and prices are going down. And
Yeah.
like, how are these companies making money?
They're not. To be clear, I mean, they're all going off venture capital money. That's to be clear. I mean, there's no way that there's getting a profit off a $5,900 humanoid robot. Like, I'm like, right now we're in the middle of a project for making a brand new prototype robot. That's a 4-legged wheeled robot, and like, we laughed at what we can buy for $5,900. So where Unitree gets their funding from, I don't literally know, but I think that it's very clear, like them, just like all these other companies, they have some kind of investor, whether it's private or it's government or something.
Like flood the market and
Yeah, I mean,
on it, and who's buying these things?
well, right now, I'm so glad you asked. So right now, research labs are buying these things because that's good. Hobbyists are buying these things. Streamers, Kai Sanat or one of the streamers. I don't know streamers. They bought one for like a gimmick. But if you buy it for a gimmick, it'll be a paperweight in a week. You know. So right now it's a novelty, right? I think where the market is going to be for people outside of researchers right now is people starting up the robot combat leagues, and I'm dead serious about that. I like what's that? Oh, manufacturing. These things are not reliable enough for manufacturing. That's the thing. They're not. I mean, like this robot will not. The Unitree R1's not going to do anything useful for you. They'll be like, oh wow, that's cool. But no. I mean, you got to understand for manufacturing robot, those robots are so well tested. They are bolted to the floor. They're going to go reliably, and any interruption to that chain shuts down the whole factory. So you can't. So sorry, I'm shuts down the whole factory, telling everyone but you. You know, you're right. So it's not going to work for them. So really, I think that a lot of these companies, they're trying to get notoriety, gets more investment, gets more attention, they get better talent, and then they will solve the problem that will make it practical. You know, the extreme version of that is fake it till you make it. The less extreme version is like look at the potential, right? Let's see. Yeah, lots of questions. Let's see. Okay, let's go all the way on that side, and we'll keep going. Thank you for your patience.
Robots that can help people with disabilities with basic household tasks. I read an article about that a year ago.
Yeah.
That they're working on a robot that can wash dishes.
So so there are many robots, and there's so many videos that didn't make the cut. But Figure AI is a company that is focusing on domestic household tasks. And yes, one tricky one is laundry folding. And they also do dishwashing. So the Unitree, the Figure AI Helix model is working on that. They show some great YouTube videos of it working really elegantly, and so people are working on it around the house. But I'll tell you, the house is a really hard problem. All these problems are hard. Okay, industry is hard because you have to be super reliable. Thank you for your question. Thank you for coming. Yeah, because you can't interrupt the supply chain. Go. If you've ever been in a factory with robots, they're whipping at maximum speed. Do it. No interruption, right? So reliability is hard there. Inside the home, safety. You know, don't want this to plow into grandpa. Don't want this to step on the family dog. That'd be bad, right? You know, or like you do things, or break your dishes in a much lower stakes case, right? That's hard. That safety problem is really hard. And then recently, you know, and right now Tesla has said they want to do all these things. At first they're like, we want to put them in factories. And then they're like, oh, and also in the house. And then the last few weeks there's like, also Mars. Like, oh, Mars. Who's going to fix this robot? Not the robots. And so not yet. So there are people working on that problem. It's a major initiative of the Toyota Research Institute. I know that personally. Full disclosure, I was funded by them at one point, so I think they're awesome. But they're not the only ones. There are lots of people who want to put it in homes. It's just really, really hard. Thank you for the question. Okay, let's go all the way in the back over there, and then we'll work our snake around. Yes?
Do you think this improving reliability and repeatedly is improving at an exponential rate as opposed to a linear rate?
Is the reliability increasing at an exponential rate? No, it is very much not. Okay, it's it's hard to get literally it's hard to get a large enough sample to even measure the 99.999 whatever. We're literally talking like 90% if you're good. If you're good at this, you get like 90%. That's impressive. Like, and as a researcher, I'm like, good job, keep going, right? But to go to 99, to 99.9, to 99.999, I think it'll take a fundamental breakthrough, not just more data to do that. Right now, we're using things like the transformers of ChatGPT or the stable diffusion of a DALL-E, right? I think we need different things that will start to push that up. It won't just be like a nice Moore's Law escalation like we get in our computer chips. All right, we went, I think we had you first, and yeah.
Yeah, if you have a foundational model like an LLM controlling a robot, how does that interface work? Because a large language model is just generating text.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you go from text to controlling a robot? Is it doing Python on the fly?
So the question is, if LLMs like ChatGPT are just generating text, how do we get them to control robots? It's true, it works with text, but there's another word for that text. It's called tokens. People have heard of tokens, right? And those tokens could theoretically be anything. You could change it to be like, move the arm forward, move the arm up. You tokenize, if you want to use a fancy word for it, your action space. And that's one of the ways that you do it. So like so people have generalized the idea of what ChatGPT does to turn it into like a series of robot actions. That's what they do. So I think we had all the way over there, and we'll come back to you, and I'm probably missing other people over here. Yes, oh, well, I'm sorry. I won't be offended if you leave, by the way, to be clear. Yes, so.
So Amazon, didn't they have one where they showed how they can grab stuff now? And do you think they'll get to the point of putting in their factory anytime soon, or not really?
So I will take your question and one more question. The company that they're working with to put Amazon to put the robots in the factories is Agility Robotics. That's the company that my professor started. They are putting them in factories, and they're doing longer demos. I think they'll get a robot fall every once or twice in like a full couple hours worth of work. So that's pretty good. I just don't know. I think that they might get faster throughput with a wheeled robot, but they seem to think that they have an application that will work for legs. So we'll take one last question here, then that'll stick around afterwards. Oh, sorry. Elena, you had a question. Sorry. Elena, your last question. Make it good. What's that?
I answered it.
You answered it. Okay. Well, we'll take it offline here. Let's thank you very much all for coming. Thanks. Thank you for staying late. I do this to my students all the time. This is for me? Oh. Well, thank you very much, Elaine. All the things. Thank you. Thank you so much.